What if the moment she finally misses you is the moment you no longer care? Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but because something inside you has shifted, something permanent. She left, thinking you'd wait, hoping you'd chase, assuming your silence was temporary. But time passed, and instead of reaching out, you reached inward. While she distracted herself with noise, you built peace in the quiet. While she tried to replace you, you became irreplaceable. Not because you begged to be remembered, but because you mastered the art of letting go. This video is not about games. It's about the deep internal evolution of a man who stops being available and starts becoming valuable. A man who no longer needs to be missed to feel whole. We're going to break down the exact stages she goes through, from distraction to regret, when she realizes the version of you she once knew is gone, and the version you've become no longer looks back. If you're done explaining yourself, if you're done waiting for closure, then hit that like button and subscribe, because this channel is about reclaiming your power, not chasing validation. Let's begin. Number 1, the distraction phase. What happens when someone loses something they once took for granted, but hasn't realized it yet? They don't feel the absence, not right away. What they feel is space. Space that looks like freedom, space that feels like excitement. She steps into this first stage after the breakup with energy, with noise. She says she's fine. She laughs louder, she posts more. Her calendar fills, dinners, trips, new faces. And to the outside world, it looks like she's thriving. But what no one sees is that she's not growing. This is where many men fail the test. They assume what they see is real, that her smiles reflect peace, that her attention to others means she's forgotten, and so they break, they reach out, they check stories, they send texts they later regret. But the Stoic man, he does something else. He pauses, he observes, and most importantly, he refrains, because he knows what Marcus Aurelius taught. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He refuses to let illusion dictate his behavior. He understands that what she's chasing in this phase isn't healing, it's escape. She's not moving forward, she's moving away, from silence, from solitude, from the discomfort of not being wanted. But eventually, that silence catches up, because distraction only works for so long. The distraction phase is filled with movement, but no direction. She might text old friends, dive into nightlife, even rush into something new. But each of these things is just a layer, thin, temporary, and superficial. Beneath it all is the void, the quiet space where your presence once lived. A space that cannot be filled by noise, only confronted. And while she runs from that confrontation, the Stoic man stays still, but not stagnant, silent, but not absent. He retreats, not to punish, but to purify. Seneca once warned, "He who is everywhere is nowhere," and that's what she becomes, everywhere at once. She's present in many places, and yet grounded in none. She thinks she's moving on, but in truth, she's circling, because no one has told her yet that peace doesn't come from motion, it comes from meaning. And in her attempt to escape discomfort, she forgets what true emotional safety once felt like. But the Stoic man, he understands the nature of value. That which is constantly available becomes invisible, and so he disappears, not out of spite, not as a tactic, but out of clarity. He no longer makes himself a character in her theater of distraction. His life becomes quiet, deep, and deliberate. He returns to his inner world, his habits, his discipline, his clarity, and without even trying, he becomes rare. Stillness in a world obsessed with noise becomes magnetic, but it's not a stillness meant to attract. It's a stillness that protects. He isn't pretending to be unbothered. He genuinely is, because his healing is not a performance, it's a commitment. Each day he refrains from checking, reacting, or reaching out. His emotional strength grows, and that quiet consistency creates something she never expected, a version of him she can no longer access. Michel de Montaigne, after losing his closest friend, didn't seek more people. He sought solitude. He went inward, not to hide, but to understand. His withdrawal became a source of clarity. That's the model. The Stoic man doesn't collapse. He doesn't self-destruct. He evolves quietly, patiently, without broadcasting it. His absence isn't just physical, it becomes spiritual. It's felt, not seen. And that weight becomes heavier than any message he could have sent. Eventually, the distraction wears off. The new faces don't offer grounding. The nights out begin to feel empty. Her phone is still full of notifications, but none of them feel like connection. And somewhere between the noise and the silence, she begins to feel something foreign. The loss of emotional safety. The absence of that quiet strength you brought into her life. But what hits the hardest is not just your absence. It's the realization that you're not waiting, you're not watching, you're not reacting. You've let go in a way she never expected. And the contrast between her chaos and your calm starts to sting. She remembers now. The steady presence, the lack of judgment, the rare feeling of being accepted as she was. And suddenly those things don't feel replaceable anymore. That's when regret begins, not loud but lingering. A memory resurfaces, a place reminds her of who she used to be when she was with you, and none of it feels like what she has now. There's a softness missing, a silence that used to feel safe, and a man she no longer has access to. This is why the Stoic man doesn't reach out, because he knows timing matters. That silence, when rooted in dignity, speaks louder than words. He doesn't chase closure. He lives in a way that creates it. And when the world around her begins to blur, it's his stillness that starts to stand out. His composure becomes contrast. His peace becomes power. He didn't get quieter to be mysterious. He got quieter to be free. And that freedom, once felt by a woman who took him for granted, becomes the very thing she now longs for and can't reclaim. So let her have this phase. Let her convince herself that she's fine. You don't need to challenge that story. You simply need to live your own. And if your silence is rooted in truth, it will echo louder than any cry for attention ever could. Because eventually the distraction phase ends. And when it does, she'll look around and realize that the one man she once overlooked is now the one man she can't reach. Number 2, routine and the comparison trap. At first, the silence felt distant, like background noise she could drown out. But now it begins to take shape, not as a dramatic event, not as a breakdown, but as something far more unsettling. Absence in routine. It's the morning coffee without the good morning text. It's the empty notification bar after a long day. It's reaching for the phone and not knowing why. That's how it starts. Not with heartbreak, but with hollow repetition. Life moves forward, but something within her no longer moves at all. In this stage, the routines she once took for granted now reveal their true weight. She didn't realize how many small moments were filled by your presence. The way you noticed, the way you responded calmly when others overreacted, the way you made silence feel safe. And because the Stoic man did not fill space with noise, he filled it with presence. His absence is now heavy. Most people assume loss happens suddenly, but the Stoics knew better. Loss unfolds slowly, quietly over time. As Seneca wrote, "Light griefs speak easily, the great ones are silent." It's in the smallest breaks of routine where the real absence sets in. And this is the turning point. when she no longer compares you to her past, but to her present. To cope with this shift, she often turns outward. She may start seeing someone new, not because she's moved on, but because she wants to feel something familiar, the validation, the rhythm, the safety. But the new person, no matter how kind or entertaining, feels off. Something is missing, and she may not admit it, but deep down, the comparison begins. And this is the trap. She tells herself she's open to someone new, but her mind is still echoing with what's missing. And this is where the Stoic man gains power, not by doing anything, but by doing nothing. He does not compete. He does not react when he hears she's dating again. He does not shrink when replaced, because he knows he cannot be replaced, not in depth, not in energy, not in peace. There's a reason the Stoics place so much emphasis on stillness. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." The Stoic man becomes rare not because he offers more, but because he needs less. His attention isn't scattered. His approval isn't for sale. His presence, once offered freely, is now protected. As her routine settles, she starts noticing what the new person lacks. It's not about status or clever conversation. It's about composure. The Stoic man didn't overpromise, and yet delivered a sense of safety no one else seems to replicate. While others fill space with chatter, he had the courage to sit in silence. While others chased validation, he offered calm. And here's the painful part for her. She realizes she had something rare, but didn't know how to hold it. She mistook steadiness for simplicity. She confused emotional discipline with lack of passion, and now, what once felt ordinary begins to feel sacred in hindsight. That's the trap of comparison. It turns routine into a mirror for regret. But what makes the regret sharper is how he handles it. The Stoic man doesn't gloat. He doesn't post indirect messages. He doesn't check up. He simply lives, quietly and with purpose. His growth isn't a show. It's a private vow. And when she hears, through others, that he's thriving, it doesn't sting because he's winning. It stings because she's no longer part of his story. This is where distance becomes depth. He didn't become cold. He became clear. And in clarity, he found dignity. In dignity, silence. And in that silence, he built something unshakable. Peace that doesn't depend on being seen or chosen. Routine exposes what drama hides. In quiet evenings, she sees the contrast. The new guy reacts too fast. He speaks without listening. He overcommits. He tries to impress. But she remembers, real depth doesn't announce itself. It holds space. It listens. It breathes. And while she compares, he detaches, not out of indifference, but because he no longer builds his identity around who understands him. His life no longer bends toward the past. It stretches forward. His mornings now begin with discipline. His nights with stillness. His energy isn't tied to being remembered. It's tied to becoming whole. Think of Marcus Aurelius. Despite being emperor, he wrote to himself, not to be praised, but to stay grounded. He didn't seek validation. He sought alignment with nature, with duty, with clarity. Likewise, the Stoic man rebuilds not with noise, but with values. And those values now define his presence, his silence, and his boundaries. She doesn't tell anyone yet, but she feels it. The new man doesn't make her feel safe when she's uncentered. He doesn't pause when she spirals. He doesn't listen without needing to fix. And in those small moments, the comparison becomes unbearable. The truth is, she didn't need someone louder. She needed someone quieter. She didn't need more drama. She needed more presence. But she couldn't see it then because she wasn't ready. And now the man she once called too calm is the one she misses when life becomes too loud. But by now, he's moved differently. He's not watching. He's not waiting. and he's no longer available. The trap isn't that she chose someone else. The trap is that she remembers the man she didn't truly value, only now, when she can no longer reach him. That's what comparison does. It doesn't just remind her of who you were. It reveals what she lost. Number 3, his stillness and growth. The true shift doesn't happen when he gets angry. It happens when he doesn't. When he chooses stillness over reaction, not as a tactic, but as a transformation. This is where most people misunderstand power. They think it's loud. They think it shows. But the Stoic man knows. Real strength is invisible at first. After the breakup, he doesn't post vague quotes. He doesn't try to look like he's winning. He disappears, not into hiding, but into rebuilding. His focus turns completely inward, and while the world assumes he's silent because he's hurting, the truth is much more unsettling. He's becoming. This is the stage where his life begins to shift, not out of spite, but out of principle. He stops checking her social media, not because he forced himself to, but because he genuinely no longer seeks updates from a life that no longer includes him. He stops talking about the breakup, not to appear healed, but because he has no desire to recycle the past. In this silence, something powerful takes root. Discipline, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. And that's exactly what the Stoic man now lives. His energy is no longer used to convince or explain. It's used to build, and every action becomes part of that process. The books he reads, the food he eats, the company he keeps, the way he trains, rests, and speaks. It's not perfection, it's precision. To outsiders, it may look like he's withdrawn, but inwardly, he's doing more than ever. He's recalibrating, and because he no longer seeks to be understood, he finally begins to understand himself. This is where the transformation becomes uncomfortable for her, because in the early days, she thought silence meant uncertainty, that he was biding time, that he was wounded. But the longer the silence holds, the more it becomes clear. He's not waiting. He's working. She might catch a glimpse of it through others, a quiet update, a subtle change. Someone tells her he's been more focused, calmer, leaner, sharper. He's doing something different. And the version of him she remembers doesn't quite match the man she's hearing about now. And this is the paradox. The less he tries to be seen, the more his absence becomes visible. The Stoics believe that suffering ends when we stop arguing with reality. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." The Stoic man has stopped resisting what is. He no longer imagines different outcomes. He simply accepts the pain and then uses it. Every wound becomes a weight he learns to carry, and with time, what was once a source of grief becomes a source of gravity. But none of this is for show. He isn't trying to trigger her regrets. He isn't hoping she sees his glow-up. In fact, his growth becomes most powerful precisely because it is private. He does not share his progress. He lives it. And that distinction is what separates appearance from substance. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, not just an artist, but a man obsessed with observation. He once wrote, "People of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things." That's what the Stoic man becomes. Not reactive, not loud, but active, inwardly active. He happens to his own life now. And that energy is not just hard to replace, it's impossible to fake. Meanwhile, she may still be cycling through distractions, but they start to wear thin. The laughter feels rehearsed, the conversations shallow, the comfort unstable, because somewhere in her memory, she still holds the feeling of what it was like to sit beside someone who didn't need to prove anything. A man who didn't demand attention. A man who was just grounded. And the more grounded he becomes, the more distant she feels from that calm. Not just physically, but emotionally, because stillness has a side effect. Detachment. The Stoic man no longer feels the same pull. His heart doesn't race when he hears her name. His mind doesn't wander when someone mentions her. He has moved through the storm, not by escaping it, but by standing still inside it. That stillness becomes contagious. People around him start noticing. He speaks slower, listens more. He's not easily triggered. He doesn't try to fix everyone. He simply holds space. And in a world full of chaos, that is rare. Eventually, she starts to feel it too. Not as jealousy, not as envy, but as a quiet ache. Because she remembers that feeling, that rare stillness, that quiet confidence. And it's gone. Not because he's punishing her, but because he's evolved beyond the need to be near her at all. And that realization hits harder than any harsh word ever could. Because what hurts is not that he left, it's that he rose. This is where the Stoic man becomes unreachable. Not physically, spiritually, emotionally, energetically. He has invested so deeply into his own clarity that being pulled back into old chaos would be betrayal. Not to her, but to himself. Stillness was never about freezing, it was about focusing. And now he's aligned in a way that no longer fits the life he once shared with her. That contrast, the man he was versus the man he is the space she can no longer cross. He didn't do it to impress her, he did it to rescue himself, and that's why it works. Number 4, sudden triggers and the lack of emotional safety. Grief doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It just arrives, uninvited, and often through the smallest doors. A song on the radio, the scent of a familiar cologne, the silence of a morning where his voice once lived. She thinks she's doing fine, until suddenly she's not. And it's not because she misses the relationship. It's because she misses the man who gave her space to breathe. That's the moment it clicks. What she longs for isn't love, drama, or closure. It's safety, not physical safety, but emotional safety. The rare experience of being completely seen and still accepted. That more than anything is what's vanished. You see, the Stoic man didn't fill rooms with noise. He didn't compete to be heard. He brought presence. Grounded, calm, unwavering presence. And in a world addicted to stimulation, that kind of presence doesn't just stand out, it becomes unforgettable. Seneca once wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." The Stoic man lived by this. He didn't rehearse pain, he didn't chase validation. He stayed composed, not for others, but because he trained himself to protect his inner peace. That composure wasn't loud, but it was deeply felt. It changed the air in the room, it softened tension, it made her nervous system settle, and she didn't even realize it was happening until it was gone. Now she's surrounded by people who are exciting, witty, driven, but they speak quickly, react faster, and rarely pause long enough to understand her. Conversations feel like performances. Vulnerability gets repackaged as weakness, and slowly she starts feeling like she has to guard herself again. That's when she remembers what she once had. Not perfection, not passion, but peace. The Stoic man didn't try to fix her emotions. He allowed space for them. When she spiraled, he stayed grounded. When she doubted herself, he didn't jump in with solutions. He just stood by her, solid and still. He didn't feed her fears. He didn't mirror her chaos. He met it with calm. And that calm was everything. Think of Ralph Waldo Emerson, he said. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. The Stoic man lived from that depth. He didn't try to control things outside himself. He mastered what was within, and that mastery made others feel safe around him. She didn't realize it then, but she was able to be more of herself in his presence, not because he said the right things, but because he didn't need her to be anything other than who she was. His energy didn't demand, it allowed. So when that random memory strikes, it's not just sentimentality, it's mourning the loss of emotional ground. She didn't just lose a boyfriend. She lost the one person who helped her feel emotionally regulated in a world of instability. She doesn't text him. She doesn't admit it out loud, but her thoughts drift. She wonders if he ever knew how deeply his calm impacted her. If he understood how his silence wasn't empty, it was healing. And if he knows that the safest she ever felt was in the quiet moments between them, when nothing had to be said at all. But now he's no longer there. Not physically, not emotionally, not energetically. That space she once had with him is closed, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. He no longer gives that calm freely. He protects it because he knows now. Not everyone deserves access to his peace. That wasn't something he always knew. It's something he learned through pain, through patience, and through letting go. She begins to feel the difference in every new conversation. They might be more charming, more engaging, but they don't regulate her. They don't make her feel grounded. They don't allow her to be fully herself. And no matter how hard she tries to replicate that connection, it never feels quite right. That's the sting, not of jealousy, but of contrast. The Stoic man didn't make her feel high. He made her feel home. And now she's homesick. His peace wasn't a strategy, it was a result of reading, of reflecting, of choosing solitude over attention, of choosing discipline over distraction. And now the man she once took for granted has become the standard by which all others are measured, and none are matching. This isn't about romance anymore. It's about regulation. It's about safety. It's about the rare and priceless feeling of sitting beside someone and not needing to explain yourself, defend yourself, or filter your truth. That space is sacred, and once lost, it leaves a permanent echo. He's not being cruel. He's being consistent. He no longer bends to prove his worth. He simply walks in alignment with it. He's not punishing her. He's protecting himself. And that boundary, soft but final, is what she feels now. The conversation she never gets to have. The words she will never say, because he has moved forward with such grace, she can no longer reach him. Not through guilt, not through charm, not even through apology. But her nervous system remembers. Her body remembers. And when she finds herself surrounded by people who stimulate but don't soothe, who impress but don't understand, she'll miss more than the man. She'll miss how she felt when she was with him. Because emotional safety doesn't shout. It simply disappears and leaves silence behind. Number 5, the realization he is unreachable and has let go. There's a moment when it hits her, not gently, but all at once. A quiet panic that begins in the chest. Not because he's silent, but because this time she knows he's not coming back. At first, his stillness seemed like pride, a phase, a tactic, something temporary. But as the days stretched into weeks and the silence remained undisturbed, a deeper truth began to take shape. He wasn't waiting for her to notice. He wasn't watching her stories, checking in through mutual friends or holding on to any thread of hope. He had vanished, not into revenge, not into games, but into peace, into a life that no longer included her. This is the kind of realization that doesn't make noise. It just settles. And what makes it unbearable is not the silence. It's the clarity. Because now she sees what true detachment looks like. Epictetus taught, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. The Stoic man lived this. He didn't just let go of her, he let go of the illusion that he needed closure, or an apology, or even understanding. He realized the only thing he ever needed was the freedom to choose peace over chaos, and he chose it with full conviction. This she had not expected. You see, most people don't walk away. They linger, they send mixed signals, they leave the door half open just in case, but not him. He closed it, not with anger, but with acceptance. And once a man reaches that kind of acceptance, he becomes unreachable. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. He no longer holds space for people who didn't know how to hold him. She starts to feel it in the small details. His absence is no longer a silence. It's a wall, not a cruel one, a calm one. The kind that doesn't block her out, but simply no longer responds to her frequency. She could send a message, but she knows. The man she once knew wouldn't answer. Not because he's bitter, but because the man who would have answered no longer exists. The Stoic man has shed the version of himself that needed to be heard. He no longer explains. He no longer justifies. He no longer tries to teach those who chose not to understand him when it mattered. And this absence of response, that's what shakes her, because it's not rooted in ego, it's rooted in evolution. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "Let us be silent that we may hear the whispers of the gods." That's what he's doing now, listening, not to her, but to himself. He has stopped trying to be part of her world. Instead, he's building his own, one built on clarity, discipline, and direction. A world where his worth is not proven, but assumed, not debated, but lived. She begins to wonder how she misread him so completely. She thought he would wait. She thought his silence was a tactic, but now she sees it was a boundary. And boundaries, when set by a Stoic man, are not warnings, they are exits. And once he walks through, he doesn't turn back. At first, this realization breeds regret, but soon after, it brings something sharper. Admiration, because she now sees how rare this kind of man is. A man who can walk away not because he wants to hurt you, but because he refuses to keep hurting himself. He's not cold, he's precise. He's not cruel, he's clean. There is no lingering tension, no passive aggression, no silent punishment. There is just space, and that space grows wider every day. What she's feeling now isn't confusion. It's the echo of a man who has truly let go. The Stoic man didn't disappear overnight. He unraveled the attachment piece by piece, through reflection, through stillness, through facing himself again and again, until he no longer reacted to the thought of her. And when that day came, he didn't announce it. He just moved forward, with grace, not resentment. She begins to hear about him through others. Not directly, just fragments. He's thriving, focused. Maybe he's building something new. Maybe he's found a new circle. Maybe he's simply enjoying the quiet. Whatever it is, he's not orbiting her anymore. And that's what finally breaks the illusion. She's no longer the center of his story. He used to respond. He used to care. He used to overthink every interaction. But now, he's sovereign, emotionally sovereign, not numb, just untethered. His value no longer fluctuates based on her validation. His identity is no longer shaped by her perception. He has become, in the purest sense, his own man. This transformation wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. Slowly, he turned inward. He read more, walked more, spoke less. And the more he listened to his own inner compass, the less he needed anyone else to co-sign his journey. He no longer explains who he is. He simply lives it. This is what Stoicism teaches. That peace is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. And now she's witnessing that mastery in real time, not through his presence, but through his absence. Because when a man is truly at peace, his silence becomes louder than words, his stillness becomes his message, and his distance, that becomes his boundary. She may never get the apology she thought she deserved. He may never know the words she's too proud to say, but one thing is clear. The man she once took for granted no longer exists, and that absence, that unreachable calm, that's what haunts her now. Not because he left, but because he didn't leave a door open behind him. You don't reclaim peace by getting even. You reclaim it by becoming untouchable, calm, clear, and unreachable to the noise that once rattled you. She doesn't miss the old version of you, the one who chased, explained, or waited. She misses the man you became once you let go. That man doesn't return because he no longer needs to. If this message spoke to something deep in you, take a moment now, like the man you're becoming, to pause, breathe, and subscribe. This channel is for those who choose mastery over reaction, clarity over chaos, and presence over performance. Stay sharp, stay grounded.